Sawadee-krap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're studying Volume 1, Chapter 8. This chapter is titled Transforming the Three Poisons, Craving, Anger, and Ignorance. This is where you're going to be able to broaden your understanding of what's plaguing the unenlightened mind and really deepen it to understand fully what's happening in the unenlightened mind and how to apply certain solutions in order to remedy this. Because as long as there's these three poisons in the mind's going to keep experiencing those discontent feelings over and over and over. All the struggles and difficulties, the stress, the anxiety, anything that the mind is experiencing that where it's having difficulties in life, it's coming from these three poisons. This is a high level way to refer to the 10 fetters, the ultimate detail of what the Buddha described that is affecting the unenlightened mind. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. And at the same time, I'd like to invite you to join for our meditation, because we start each class with a meditation to help you train your mind on the path to enlightenment. And then after the meditation, I will share teachings with you on the three poisons, opening up to any and all questions that you guys have as we go along. If you guys would like to join along in the chanting, I'm going to start with some chanting to ease us into the meditation. You're welcome to find these chants on our website at buddhadailywisdom.com. You can click on free books, and then from there you scroll down to the bottom and you'll see the daily chanting sheet to be able to help you see what it is that I'm actually chanting. This helps to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. It's not a rite or ritual or a ceremony or worship or anything like that. Then after the chanting, I'm going to come in with some guidance to guide students in the meditation. So you'll actually be learning how to meditate and guided in the meditation as you're easing into the meditation. Then there's going to be a long period of time where we're all just meditating together. Then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. And then that's where I'll start today's class. So if you'd like to take a position, either seated, lying, or standing, these work really well for online learning. There is a walking position, but it doesn't tend to work very well, but there's no harm in you doing that. If you are familiar with how to do walking meditation, you could totally do that instead. So if you'd like to join for meditation, find whatever position is comfortable for you. And then I'm going to do the chanting and come in with the guidance and take us into the meditation from there. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Utang Mahakawanhang Apiwateyami Sawakato Mahakawata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma sati sata tawa manusanang Oto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, not forced or controlled. Just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, breathing in and out, breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาโอตังมหาเขวันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมดามังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสตาตาวามนุสนังโอโตภาควาติ All right, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. Welcome to our class today. As I mentioned, we're going to be discussing the three poisons or the three unwholesome roots or three fires. These are ways that this is referred to. This is craving, anger, and ignorance. And this is going to help you to be able to broaden your understanding of what's really plaguing the unenlightened mind and really deepen it to understand what's happening and what you need to do to actually transform the mind. As we go in our class today, you're more than welcome to ask any and all questions that you like by just putting those into the comment section of Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically, unmute your microphone, and ask your questions that way. So the teachings of the Buddha are to help you get to this enlightened mental state where the mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. The mind no longer experiences any discontent feelings. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of this is eliminated from the mind through training of the mind. And what you're doing is you're uprooting these pollutions of craving, anger, and ignorance. The way the Buddha describes in the most level of detail what's going on in the unenlightened mind is through the 10 fetters. That's where you see the 10 individual pollutions of what's plaguing the mind. And you need to be able to understand what those are, what the symptoms are, how to eliminate them, and how to know that they've actually been eliminated. This is something that you learn as you progress in your journey. So far, I've just introduced students to the 10 fetters in this particular program. But as you go further into other programs, you'll see that through the various courses and retreats that I share, you're going to get into the depth of what the 10 fetters are. You need that at that point in time. But at this point in time, you've already started to learn perhaps the Four Noble Truths, where you have this window into understanding the unenlightened mind, that it's craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning that's causing the mind to experience these discontent feelings. But there's more at play here than just that. There's actually 10 individual fetters, and when we talk about them from a high level, we refer to them as craving, anger, and ignorance. And when you uproot these out of the mind, that's where the peace and the joy is being experienced. That's where you notice the focus, concentration, the clarity, and the deep memory, because these pollutions are no longer in the mind. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships are blossoming and they're at ease because you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile any longer in your relationships. And you'll notice you're not even in a bad mood because the causes and conditions that is producing that has been uprooted. And these are the causes and conditions, the pollutions of mind. And these are acquired over time. As we age, an individual can acquire more and more of these pollutions. Some people might even refer to this as conditioning of the mind. When you're born, you have the craving and the ignorance, but you don't have the anger. But because of the craving and ignorance, the mind accumulates the anger and it accumulates all this other conditioning. But you can transform this, you can uproot it and eliminate it out of the mind. And part of being able to do that is to understand what these are, what the symptoms of them are, and then how to actually apply certain tools and techniques to eliminate them, and then to actually do the work to, on a day-to-day basis, be applying these tools and techniques to eliminate them. You wouldn't be able to just snap your fingers and eliminate these. This is the gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress that you need to make in order to be able to uproot these and eliminate them out of the mind. So what I'm going to do is share with you first what these are from a high level, helping you to understand them. And then we're going to go into each one individually, understanding them in more detail and the actual solutions of how to eliminate them. So just from a high level, what these are referred to as the three poisons or three unwholesome roots or three fires. Some people refer to them as defilements or the pollutions of the mind. This is a high level description of what the unenlightened mind is experiencing and why it's experiencing these particular things. It helps to explain why the unenlightened mind makes certain decisions and why it experiences unwholesome results in your life or unwholesome karma. Next week, we're going to be exploring the natural law of karma in detail, but just in general, this is cause and effect or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. Whenever you make decisions either wisely or unwisely, it's going to produce a certain result, either wholesome or unwholesome. So if you make decisions wisely, you will experience wholesome results or wholesome karma. When you make decisions unwisely, you're going to experience unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. And this is from your own mind, your own decisions. It's not from somebody else. It's not anything mystical or magical. The natural law of karma isn't about punishments and rewards or who's to blame or who's at fault or anything like this. There's no being who's overseeing this natural law. It's affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. And when you lack wisdom of it, you're going to tend to go out in the world, make unwise decisions, and you'll experience unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. So what you're experiencing in day-to-day life, it's not good luck or bad luck. It's not destiny or fate. It's not other people who are causing these things to occur in your life. It's not this natural or this supreme being that's causing things to happen in your life. They're not controlling you. And if somebody resigns themselves to that type of thinking, then basically you're locked in. You can't do anything to change any aspect of your life. Because if it's destiny or fate, you have no ability to change that. If it's good luck or bad luck, you have no ability to change that. If it's other people that are causing you to experience the things you experience, you have no ability to change or control them. Or if it's some supreme being that's controlling what you experience, again, you have no ability to control that. You're a robot. And you know that this is untrue. And you can see this for yourself by looking at what you experience on a day-to-day basis. Just ask yourself, who controlled you or forced you to listen to this class? Was it God? Was it other people? No, this was a choice that you make. Look at the clothes that you're wearing, or the hairstyle that you're wearing, or the location that you're currently living, or any particular job or occupation that you may or may not have. These are all choices and decisions that you're making. You have free will. And when you make decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, you're going to experience unwholesome results because these are the unwholesome roots. But when you uproot these out of the mind and you make decisions through the wholesome roots, you'll experience wholesome results. So slowly but surely, you're gradually decreasing your pollutions of mind, making less and less decisions through those until you ultimately eliminate them. And then you're gradually increasing the wholesome qualities in your mind and making more and more decisions through those. And ultimately, you get to a point where you're only experiencing wholesome results or wholesome karma in your day-to-day life. So these three poisons or three unwholesome roots provides a clear description of the problems in the unenlightened mind and how to eliminate those through applying the remedies or the antidotes to solve the problems, moving the mind to enlightenment. As I mentioned, it's the 10 fetters that explains these problems in detail so that you can understand them, but you need to understand them at this level too, because it will help you. So the antidotes that you're going to learn about today, the remedies, these are referred to as the three wholesome roots. And when you make decisions through these, you'll experience wholesome results or wholesome karma. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing wholesome results in your day-to-day life. So now just understanding these from a high level, and then we'll go into each one in detail, is these are referred to as craving, anger, and ignorance, or greed, hatred, and delusion. Craving is what you've been learning about in this group learning program so far. This is the craving, desire, attachment, the wants, the expectations, the longing, the yearning, wanting things to be a certain way, craving permanence. This is where the mind is thinking the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So it chases after it, and it chases and it chases. It's like an unquenchable thirst. The mind just wants these external things to provide lasting satisfaction, so it chases after them. And when the mind gets what it wants, it gets those pleasant feelings, the happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. And when it doesn't get what it wants, it gets those painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, and others like this. And then there's the neither painful nor pleasant feelings that the mind is experiencing as well. So as long as there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind is forming its inner feelings based on something external. And if the mind gets what it wants, it gets happy. And if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets those painful feelings. The mind is craving permanence in this situation. It's craving for the sun to be permanent. It's craving for relationships to be permanent. It's maybe craving for your bank account to be permanent. There's all these cravings that the mind has. And again, if it gets what it wants, it gets those pleasant feelings. But if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets these painful feelings. And one of the things that can arise in the mind when it's experiencing these painful feelings is anger, hatred, and ill will. And the lesser versions like frustration, agitation, annoyance, and things of this nature. And when this is occurring, the mind falsely attributes these feelings to something external, like a person or a situation. And now the mind becomes unskillful in the way that it handles the situation. So it might push people away, or it pushes a situation away. This is called aversion. The mind thinks that, I'm not getting what I want here. And if I push this person or this situation away, I can get what I want, which is my cravings fulfilled. Or the mind might be bitter and harsh and hostile towards others through your intentions, your speech, or your actions. And once again, this is the mind trying to get its cravings fulfilled. The mind thinks if I can just fear this other being through being harsh and bitter and hostile into doing things my way, then I get what I want. But this doesn't work because you can't go around and be bitter and harsh and hostile to people and get everybody to do things your way, because that bitterness and hostility is just going to come back to you. So as long as you're being bitter, harsh, and hostile to people, it's like an animal growling and roaring at another animal, trying to fear them into doing things your way. And now you can't live harmoniously with those beings, and some of them choose to leave out of your life because you're being bitter and harsh and hostile. Or you might put your expectations on people and try to control people and force them to do things your way through putting your expectations on them. And again, this is the mind trying to get its cravings, desires, attachments fulfilled, because this anger has arisen and it has this third poison, which is the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, this lack of wisdom, this confusion, this misunderstanding, this misperception of how the world works. The mind firmly believes in the unenlightened state with its lack of wisdom that other people are causing you to be angry or frustrated or agitated or annoyed. And this is due to the mind's lack of wisdom. And as long as the mind lacks wisdom about these natural laws, then it's going to continue to stay stuck in this cycle of craving things. In some cases, you get what you want and you get happy, but that's ultimately unsatisfying because it's only temporary. Your mind ultimately ends up in the painful feelings. So in some cases, you're going to get what you want, and in other cases, you're not going to get what you want, and you get those painful feelings. The anger is arising. You might be pushing people away, being bitter, harsh, and hostile, or putting your expectations on people. And this ignorance or this lack of wisdom of what's truly occurring keeps you locked in this continuous cycle. So while we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, it's really because of the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality that the craving and anger continues to exist in the mind. So this can all be transformed and uprooted when you have the solutions of understanding what is really causing these issues and how to actually apply the solutions to fixing it. The Eightfold Path that the Buddha teaches, that's the complete solution. But there's certain things that are targeting each one of these poisons. So you would need to know, you would need to know the Eightfold Path inside and out, backwards and forwards. You're going to need to dial that in closer and closer into your life. But there's certain things that are targeting each one of these individual pollutions. So the Eightfold Path is the complete solution. And then you can understand what is actually targeting this, but understanding that you also need to apply all the factors of the Eightfold Path to completely uproot all of these out of the mind. So once again, that craving, desire, attachment, it's wants and expectations. The mind is essentially craving permanence, wanting things to be permanent. And you can independently verify this in your life. You can think about certain situations where you've been angry or frustrated or irritated or annoyed, and you can see that your mind was longing, yearning, wanting something to be a certain way. Your mind was holding on. And if you got what you wanted, you would have been happy or excited. But because the mind didn't get what it wanted, it got the frustration or the agitation or the annoyance. And this is the craving. This is the mind seeking satisfaction externally, wanting things to be a certain way permanently. And because you live in an impermanent world, you will never experience things around you, the material objects, being permanent. Anything you see, hear, smell, any flavors that touch the tongue, any physical objects that come in contact with the body, or anything that goes through the mind are all impermanent. But as long as the mind is craving permanence, but yet you live in an impermanent world, you'll continue to have struggles and difficulties over and over and over again. So the problem that the Buddha discovered is the discontent feelings. That's what's plaguing the human existence and causing an individual to feel misery and grief and despair and displeasure. The cause of that problem is craving, desire, attachment, wants, and expectations, the longing, the yearning. The elimination of the cause is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and it's the Eightfold Path that's going to ultimately guide you in how to actually eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. And as part of that Eightfold Path, there's two things that are really honing in and targeting the craving, desire, attachment the most, in addition to everything else. There's breathing mindfulness meditation, which is what we just did, and there's generosity. The breathing mindfulness meditation, you're focused on the breath, and anytime the mind moves off the breath, you're cutting that off, letting it go, and bringing the mind back to the breath. What the mind's doing here is it's cultivating the wholesome qualities of mindfulness or awareness of mind and concentration, be able to focus on a fixed object. And when the mind moves off the breath, you're training the mind to eliminate its cravings, desires, attachments by letting go, letting go, letting go. So what this meditation is doing is it's training your mind to let go, because the cravings, desires, attachments, the mind's holding on, it's clinging, it's wanting things to be a certain way. It can't let go. And you can see this if you think back to that time where you had a boyfriend or girlfriend and you guys broke up and you were angry or frustrated or agitated. You can see that for a period of time, you experience those feelings. But at some point, your mind let go. And when you let go, that's where your peace came back. You were like, you know what? If she wants to be with somebody else, so be it. And you let go. Or you're like, if he wants to move to another part of the country and not spend time with me, okay, so be it. And your mind let go. And when you let go, that's where the peace came in. But in the unenlightened state, with a lack of discipline and training, the mind doesn't know how to let go. So the breathing mindfulness meditation, when you're in meditation, you're training to cut off anything and everything, understanding that your goal is not to eliminate your thoughts. That's not the goal of this meditation. Sometimes people think that's the goal due to the instruction and the guidance. But even an enlightened being has occasional thoughts during their meditation, but they notice it right away, they cut it off and let it go, and they bring their mind right back to their breath. But then they have these long periods of time of quietness and stillness in between their thoughts. But with an unenlightened mind, there'll be a bombardment of thoughts, like rapid thoughts, or you'll indulge in a thought and follow that for a period of time before you realize oh yeah, that's right, I'm meditating. Let me bring my mind back to the breath. So in meditation, you're cutting off anything and anything that's coming up because you're developing the ability to let go. But then in day-to-day life, you're only cutting off the unwholesome things, right? Like if you have the thought like you want to punch your boss in the face, you know that's going to lead to unwholesome results. So you need to cut that off and let it go. Don't allow that thought to continue. But if you have the thought that you'd like to take your mom or dad out to lunch or dinner, or you'd like to call up your children and see how they're doing, or some other wholesome thing, you don't have to cut that off in day-to-day life. You're training in one way. You're taking your mind to the gym and building this muscle, essentially, this quality of being able to cut off and let go. But then in day-to-day life, you're only cutting off the unwholesome things. Like when the anger is coming up or the frustration's coming up, you cut that off and let it go. When you notice those bodily sensations, the tingling in the body, the tightening in the chest, the tightening in the throat, the heat in the face, the pressure in the skull, that's what you're cutting off and letting go of. And if you do this enough, both training in meditation and cutting off and letting go in day-to-day life, you will ultimately completely transform your mind and you won't experience any discontent feelings. You're not suppressing your thoughts here. You're not suppressing your feelings or emotions. You're actually cutting it off before it actually becomes a feeling, because the mind's trying to form a conditioned feeling based on some condition, based on some contact that you're experiencing through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. The mind's trying to form this feeling of either happiness because you're experiencing agreeable contact, or you're trying to experience or form the painful feelings of sadness or anger or frustration based on this disagreeable contact that you're experiencing. And you're essentially trying to rewire the mind so that it no longer forms these conditioned feelings. You're cutting it off and letting it go, not allowing the mind to experience that. And then more and more, you'll get to the unconditioned mental qualities where the mind is just bright and radiant and uplifted, where it's no longer forming its feelings based on these external things. You just understand that, yeah, this is impermanence, and the mind's not going to be able to get things its way permanently. So the breathing mindfulness meditation is there as a consistent, ongoing training. You'd like to train 2 or 3 times a day, building up to 2 or 3 times for 30 minutes or more, understanding that this can take 6 months, a year, even 2 years to build up to that type of frequency and that type of length. You won't get to enlightenment through meditating just once a day. But if you can build up to 2 or 3 times a day, that would be ideal. So if you're doing one meditation a day right now, try to get that second one in there, even if it's just 5 minutes, even if it's just 10 minutes. Start there where your mind has a tendency to meditate that second time, and then just gradually expand that time to be longer and longer. You would like to get those 2 sessions in there where you're frequently training the mind. So the breathing mindfulness meditation is training the mind to let go, let go, let go. And of course, you're getting that mindfulness or awareness of mind and the concentration. But also generosity is training the mind to let go too. Because when the mind has craving, desire, attachment, it can oftentimes be very selfish. It can hold on to things, wanting things to be self-pleasing. Whereas if you spend 3 hours doing something, you want this in return. Or if you spend 3 days doing this, you want this in return. This is the mind's craving, desire, attachment. But you can get to a point where you let that go, where you're able to practice generosity, that in situations that you decide for yourself, you can share your time, effort, energy, and resources more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, like your time, effort, energy, and resources. This is where you don't want anything in return. You don't expect anything, but you're just giving and sharing because you know it's enhancing the quality of your mind. And by enhancing the quality of your mind, training your mind to let go, this is going to help you in other parts of your life to let go. But you need to be careful when you're practicing generosity because the mind can have these expectations that you don't realize. Like if you're standing there holding the door for somebody and you're expecting them to say thank you, you'll get frustrated when they walk through the door and they don't say thank you. And you can ask yourself, is everybody going to say thank you on the way into the door? And the answer is no, because of impermanence. Some people are going to say thank you and some people aren't. But if you're standing there holding the door, craving that permanence, craving that thank you, you're not actually practicing pure generosity because you still have an expectation of something in return. You want that thank you. And while it'd be wonderful if everybody did say thank you, that's just not the world we live in. Some of these people walking in the door, they're not even going to see you because their mind is so engrossed in thinking about what it is they want out of that store that they're not even going to see that you're holding the door. But you need to be able to practice this generosity without any expectation of anything in return. And you would like to do this frequently. This should be a daily practice of practicing generosity and meditation too. These are things that you're doing frequently because the craving is so deeply rooted in the mind. You need to hit it and hit it and hit it and hit it and hit it. But even with generosity, you need to do this from the middle way because you need to be sure that you have the needs that you need in order to survive to be fulfilled. So whether you're sharing your time, effort, energy, or resources, you need to do that from the middle way. Whereas if you were doing that with craving, desire, attachment, you're doing that excessively, that's not what you're interested in. But if you were never sharing, the mind would be quite selfish. So you go outside and you see your neighbor has trash blown all over their yard. Maybe you pick it up for them, right? If you have time, maybe you pick it up. This is generosity. You don't want anything from them. You don't expect anything from them. You don't even need to tell them that you did it. You just did it because you know it's a wise thing to do to enhance the quality of your mind. So breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity are really targeting this craving, desire, attachment, training the mind to let go. Let me know if you guys have questions here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. You guys are probably fairly familiar with this because this is what we've been talking about all the way through this program so far. But now we're going to move into talking about some other things that we haven't necessarily discussed in much detail. Because when the mind has craving and it gets what it wants, it gets those pleasant feelings. But when it's not getting what it wants, it can get those painful feelings. And one of the things that can occur is the mind can experience this arising of anger, hatred, and ill will. And all those lesser versions like frustration, agitation, annoyance, and so forth. This is where the mind can become bitter and harsh and hostile. It can have aggression and resentment towards other beings. And this is where the mind is functioning unskillfully because the mind in the unenlightened state firmly believes that this anger is coming from something external. So what it will tend to do is push people away or push the situation away. That's aversion. That doesn't solve the problem. You can see when you've done that before that it didn't solve the problem because the problem is the discontentedness. If the cause of the problem was this family member or this person and you push them away, if they were the true cause of the problem, you would eliminate your problem. You would be completely peaceful and joyful when you push this person away. But that didn't solve your problem. Or you might be bitter and harsh and hostile through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And now through doing that, that's going to produce difficulties and struggles in your life too, because as long as you're putting out bitterness, harshness, and hostility, this is what's going to come back to you in your day-to-day life. This is, like I mentioned, like an animal growling and roaring at another animal. And you can't go around doing that and constantly trying to fear people into doing things your way, because they're only going to do things that way as long as that fear is there. And you're not interested in people fearing you or fearing the repercussions of what it is that you want them to do. This is like coercing them or trying to manipulate them into doing things your way. But you're not interested in that because you can't live harmoniously with all beings, and people aren't going to feel comfortable being around you in that kind of situation. Or if you're putting your expectations on people and trying to control them to do things your way, this is again the mind trying to get its cravings fulfilled, not fully understanding the problem. So as long as the mind is bitter and harsh and hostile and resentful, you can't live harmoniously with all beings. And this unskillfulness that you're putting out is just going to keep coming back to you over and over and over again. And how could you get to peace and joy if you're constantly experiencing this bitterness and harshness and hostility coming back to you over and over and over again? So there's a better way here, right? When your mind is experiencing someone being bitter and harsh and hostile to you, you might be going down this well-worn path of anger and bitterness and hostility. Or when you see something that you disagree with and you want it to be a different way than it is, you might be going down this well-worn path of anger and bitterness and hostility. You've got the bushes pushed back. You've got the grass worn out. You know where this path leads to. This path leads to broken relationships. And you've experienced that over and over and over again, where you've had that anger and bitterness and hostility, and you keep experiencing that over and over and over again. So what you're doing on this path to enlightenment, among other things, is you're forging a new path. You're going down this other way, but you're going to have to create this path. The mind doesn't go down this path naturally by itself. So you're going to have to get out your machete, and you're going to have to cut through these bushes and stickers and these branches and clear this new path. And that's why it's challenging to go down this path, because you're rewiring the mind to now go down this path of loving kindness. That's what you would ultimately like to do to fix this anger, hatred, and ill will. You're going to need to develop a loving kindness meditation practice, which is very different than what we just did today. There's other classes where I've taught this loving kindness meditation. I did this towards the beginning of the group learning program, where I did a 4-part series on loving kindness meditation. And if you didn't learn that, you can go back and learn that through the recordings on YouTube or Facebook on our podcast. Because you're going to need to do this loving kindness meditation where you're essentially rewiring the mind to be loving and kind and warm and gentle towards all beings, where you have a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, not just other beings, but this being who you are as well. You might have a negative inner dialogue. You might have this degrading and diminishing speech inside your own mind towards this being who you are. And you can uproot that. You can get to the point where you have a positive and uplifting inner dialogue. And it's the loving kindness meditation that's going to help you rewire the mind towards this being who you are, but also others as well. And as you're doing this day by day, integrating at least one loving kindness meditation session into your daily meditation practice. So out of your 2 or 3 meditations per day, you would like at least one of those to be loving kindness meditation. And this is essentially like filling up your gas tank. And you fill this up, and now you go out into the world and you practice loving kindness on a daily basis through your intentions, your speech, and your actions, where you can be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to all beings around you without any judgment or wanting anything in return from them. Just understanding that it's wise for you to be loving and kind and warm and gentle. Even if other people are being different than that, you can go out into the world and be loving and kind. But you need this loving kindness meditation to really fill up the mind with loving kindness to make it easier for you to go out into the world and be loving and kind. And that's you taking out your machete and clearing this new path. And more as you clear this new path, it will become easier and easier. Initially, it's quite challenging. But as you get down this path more and more, and you get it more cleared, it's easier and easier for you to walk down this path. This old path that you're not going down anymore, this anger and hatred and ill will, that gets overgrown. The bushes and the stickers and the grass and all that comes back, and your mind doesn't even look down that path anymore because you know that you can't go down that path because the mind has been rewired. So now you go down this path of loving kindness more and more and more. So in situations where in the past you've been angry and bitter and hostile and harsh, you're going to have to do something different. In order to experience something new and improved, this better way of life, you're going to need to do something different. And I can give you an example from my life, that when I was growing up in life, I had a lot of bitterness and harshness and hostility toward my mom because of things that were happening during my childhood. And when me and mom were together, it was only a matter of time before the fireworks went off. And I would go down this well-worn path of anger and bitterness and hostility. If mom picked up the ball of rubber ball of anger and hatred and threw it around the room, I would pick it up and throw it around the room. And she would pick it up and throw it around the room. And next thing you know, we got all these rubber balls of anger and hatred bouncing around the room. And this doesn't work. I really wanted mom to change. I kept wanting and wanting and wanting mom to change. And it never happened. So I became wiser, and I decided that I needed to focus on my own mind and transforming my own mind. And that's when I started doing loving kindness meditation and started practicing loving kindness in day-to-day life towards mom and towards all other beings. And I was gradually wearing away this anger, hatred, and ill will. And I didn't know each day how much I was wearing away. But when it was completely gone, I knew that because it was 6 months, a year, 2 years, that I wasn't angry and bitter and harsh. I didn't have a harsh word towards mom. Where in the past, when we'd be talking on the phone and she would say something judgmental or bitter or harsh or angry, I would be that same way back with her. But now I started doing something different. When she was being bitter and harsh and hostile, I would say things like, Mom, I know that I've been angry and frustrated with you in the past, and I've said things that are unwise, but I'm choosing not to do that anymore. I'm going to get off the phone and let you think about what it is that you just said, and then we'll talk another time, Mom. I love you. Bye bye. And I would get off the phone rather than being bitter and harsh and hostile. Because mom's not going to extinguish her anger towards me by me coming at her with more anger. That just keeps the anger flowing. So in this case, I was loving and kind. And then there'd be another time, like I'd be away from her for 2 months or 6 months, wouldn't call her or something like that. Then eventually I would call her. We'd be talking for a few months. And then at some point she'd be bitter and harsh and hostile. And I would say, Mom, I prioritize this relationship more than being bitter and harsh and hostile to you. And I apologize for the times that I did that in the past, but I'm choosing not to do that anymore. And I'm going to get off the phone and let you think about what it is that you just said. I love you, Mom. We'll talk another time. Bye bye. Right? So I met her anger and bitterness with love and kindness. And more, she started transforming her mind because she was interested in talking with her son. And what she realized is every time she was bitter and harsh and hostile, her son got off the phone. I just walked away, right? And this is what you can do in your relationships too, whether it's physically or whether it's on the phone or text messages or things like this. You can transform your mind and transform your life as long as you're in relationships where you're wanting other people to change, but yet you're not doing the work yourself. You're not going to be able to transform your relationships. So it's kind of like a log jam that me and Mom had. And I had to pull out the log of anger and the log of hatred and the resentment so things could flow in our life better. And this is what produced the results. And when you're practicing loving kindness meditation and you're practicing loving kindness in day-to-day life, you're not going to know each day how much the bitterness and anger and hatred has been worn away. But when it's completely gone, you're going to know that. The Buddha gives a great analogy on this. He talks about a digging tool that has a wooden handle. And if you're digging with this wooden handled tool, each day you're wearing away the wood on the handle, but you don't know how much. But when it's completely gone and you need to replace this handle, you're going to know that. And the same thing is true with this anger, hatred, and ill will. You need to be committed and have confidence to practicing the loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness through your intention, speech, and actions. And each day you're going to be wearing away anger, hatred, and ill will and all those lesser versions. You're not going to know how much, but when it's completely gone, like when it was gone in my relationship with my mom, I knew that because I could see how long it had been that there was no bitterness or hostility coming up in that relationship. So in order to clean up your relationships, using this loving kindness meditation and this loving kindness to get rid of this anger, hatred, and ill will, there's certain relationships that you have right now that you're not committed to, and you're maybe being harsh and bitter and hostile, and so is the other person. And it's better to just let go. Just better to move on from those relationships. That's one way to clean this up. It's just let go of the relationship and move on. There's another type of relationships that you have that maybe there's challenges and difficulties in those relationships, but you're more committed to them and you're willing to do the work on your own mind. And as you do that, maybe you need to put the relationship on pause and step away for a little bit. But now you come back into the relationship and now you're being loving and kind and warm and gentle. And this is a relationship that you're more committed to. Maybe like your parents, your siblings, your life partners, your children, people like this. These are relationships that you can clean up by first focusing on cleaning up your own mind. And then there's a third category of relationships, which are brand new people that you've never even met before. You don't even know what their names are right now. But by you training your mind like this, and ultimately when you meet those people in the future, you're only going to be loving and kind to those individuals. And now that's all you'll experience in those relationships. So this is how you clean up your relationships and you clean up your life to get to the point where all your relationships are harmonious. Some relationships you let go of and you just move on. You don't need to go to the person and tell them what you're doing. You just choose to gradually move on. Then the second type of relationship are relationships you're more committed to, and you're going to step away, train your own mind, and then maybe be involved in that relationship so that you can now function in a better way through loving kindness. And then there's that third category of relationship where they're brand new people you haven't even met yet, and you'll only ever be loving and kind in those relationships. And that's what you'll experience coming back to you. So this anger, hatred, and ill will, you're not born with this. This is the mind accumulating it over time. Because we had cravings, desires, attachments when we were born, that our mind craved certain things, we experienced this anger and bitterness and hostility, and our mind became conditioned like that. And it's deeply rooted in the mind. And the meditation of loving kindness is like a jackhammer, going in there and jackhammering this up. And then when you're going out into the world and practicing your loving kindness through your intention, speech, and actions, that's you purifying the mind and breaking through this wall. Because when you push people aside, or you're bitter, harsh, and hostile with them, or something like this, it's almost like you erect a wall between you and this person. And you don't necessarily have to go back to these people and change anything, but you're going to need to break down these walls where you don't have the anger and bitterness and hostility towards other beings. So the loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness is like a jackhammer that's going in there and jackhammering this up. But you still need the right view, right intention, right speech, right action, and all these other teachings on the Eightfold Path to be able to help you. But this is what's really targeting your anger, your hatred, and your ill will. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Again, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. It looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
I actually had a few questions, but you answered them. So I only have one remaining. The question that I have is, so in the beginning of my practice, I was doing loving kindness meditation every day. That's what I would wake up, and that's the one I would do to kind of set my day in progress. I have noticed that, lately my morning meditations, I'm just doing breathing mindfulness meditation. And the only time I kind of pick up loving kindness meditation is if I notice that if I'm going throughout the day and I have any interactions that arises a little bit of ill will, or if I have a frustrating conversation with someone, or the mind experiences frustration with a conversation with someone, then I'll go back to the loving kindness meditation. So my question to you is, even if the mind isn't experiencing, let's say, any ill will towards anyone, should that loving kindness still be a part of a daily practice, or is it okay to kind of go as the mind's going right now?
If I were you, what I would do, and this is for everyone else too, is out of your 2 or 3 meditation sessions, make the morning meditation loving kindness like you used to do, because then you can go out into the world filled up with your gas tank with loving kindness. So now when you go out, it'll be much easier for you to be loving and kind in these relationships. And then you would like to continue doing that with your breathing mindfulness meditation and all the other factors until it's been a minimum of 6 months that you haven't seen any anger towards any beings, not even the slightest frustration or dislike. Because what you're doing is you're knocking back your anger to a certain degree, and then you're waiting for it to arise again before you come in with the loving kindness, which means you haven't actually uprooted it out of the mind. You're not interested in stopping your loving kindness meditation until the anger is completely uprooted from the mind. You need to completely destroy it. And you're not going to be able to say that you've done that until it's been a minimum of 6 months where you haven't seen any agitation, frustration, irritation, or the slightest dislike towards another being. That's where you would like to, be able to consider potentially no longer doing loving kindness meditation. And you might even decide to get that closer to a year, because if you stop your loving kindness meditation too soon, the risk is that, this anger grows, you cut it back partially, and it just kind of suppressed, and it's still there. It's still the fetter or this pollution of anger is still there, but you don't really see it until it grows again. So you haven't really uprooted it, and you would like to stomp it out and completely uproot it from the mind.
Thank you, Teacher David.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. I don't see anything anywhere else. So now we'll go to the third poison, which is the whole reason why these other two even exist. If it wasn't for this third poison, the other two wouldn't even exist. So when the mind's craving and it's getting what it wants, it gets that happiness. When it doesn't get what it wants, it gets the painful feelings like anger, hatred, ill will, and others. And now when this anger is coming up, the mind's pushing away, being bitter, harsh, and hostile, putting its expectations on people. Well, the whole reason why this is actually occurring is because of the lack of wisdom. Some people refer to this as ignorance, but this is a derogatory word. A better way to think about it is the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, the misunderstanding, the misperception, the confusion in the mind, that the mind lacks wisdom, that it doesn't understand the natural laws of existence. And because it is unknowing of these natural laws of existence, it continues to crave and it continues to have ignorance. I'm sure you've been in arguments before with people, just like I was in the past, where you were adamantly trying to convince people that what they were doing was causing you to be angry and they have to stop doing what they're doing, or else you're going to continue to be angry. We might have fought to death almost in these situations. It's like an animal, right? The unenlightened mind is almost like an animal. It's like fighting to death with this person to try to convince them that they are wrong and you are right and they need to stop doing what they're doing. This is the mind being bitter, harsh, and hostile and putting its expectations on others. And the only reason why the mind does this is because of its lack of wisdom, its ignorance. It firmly believes this other person is causing you to be angry or frustrated or agitated. But you're not going to solve your problems by convincing other people to do things a certain way, because the mind still has craving. You can't go around and teach 8 billion people to do things your way, and that way all your cravings get fulfilled. So as long as the mind has this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality, this lack of wisdom, this confusion, misunderstanding how the world truly functions and how the true world truly works, then it's going to continue to stay stuck with its craving and its anger. So while we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, it's actually because of ignorance that craving and anger continues to exist. Because if you cultivated enough wisdom of what craving, desire, attachment is, and what anger is, and how to eradicate these because of the problems that it's causing you, if you had enough wisdom around that, you would have eradicated craving and anger. If you would be able to see exactly what craving is and the problems that it's causing in your life, and you cultivate the wisdom of how to eradicate it, you would have actually already done that by now. But because the mind is still experiencing discontentedness, there's a certain degree of ignorance or unknowing of true reality. This wisdom that we're talking about cultivating through the investigation of learning, reflecting, and practicing the teachings, there's a certain intellectual aspect to it, and there's intellectual learning. But to get to wisdom, it's not just the intellectual learning. You need to also reflect, to independently verify, and you need to practice. So even if you intellectually know something, but you're not practicing it, there's still ignorance or unknowing of true reality there in the mind. This is how we know when somebody's actually enlightened, because we can see through their practice and the way that they interact in the world. So if you think back to when we were maybe younger, that we might have known that it's unwise to use drugs and alcohol. Intellectually, we know that that was an unwise thing for us to do. But because of our ignorance, we still did it, right? Because we had these cravings, desires, attachments in the mind. We were chasing those pleasant feelings. And because of our ignorance, not realizing the harm that we were causing, we still chose to do it. So intellectually, you can understand something, but you're not practicing it. That's because the ignorance is still there. So the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality gets eradicated through the cultivation of wisdom. And wisdom gets cultivated through learning, reflecting, and practicing. As you're practicing, that's where your mind fully comes into the wisdom, because you've examined and investigated the teachings. Intellectually, you can see that they're true. And then you've reflected on your past experiences and the experiences of people around you. And you're like, oh yeah, this looks really true. But now when you start practicing it and you're making decisions in line with how the Buddha taught these teachings, now you can start building this life practice for yourself. And more you're getting rid of this pollution of ignorance, because you're becoming wiser and wiser of how to function in the world. It's like evolving to a better and better human being. Just like a lizard or a snake evolves throughout time, human beings can do the same exact thing. We don't have to resort to craving and anger. We don't have to keep experiencing discontentedness over and over and over again. We can evolve to becoming a better and better human being, moving to this higher consciousness where we no longer have these pollutions and we have uprooted them, and now we can eliminate the discontent feelings. But as long as there's a lack of wisdom in the mind, you won't know how to do that. So that's why you come to classes. That's why you read books. That's why you seek guidance from your teacher and all these other things. You're looking to cultivate wisdom, but you're always maintaining this as your own independent practice. You are on your own journey to enlightenment. Your teacher is providing the resources and the guidance like a tour guide, but you're the one who's doing the work, and you're stepping forward to be able to cultivate that wisdom through learning, reflecting, and practicing. And this is why you've been taught from the very beginning to never believe anything that I say. Don't believe anything that I write in books. Don't believe anything that anybody else says. Because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because either other people convinced you to believe it or you convinced yourself to believe it. So these teachings aren't about believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens when you die. Instead, you need to cultivate wisdom now in this life through learning now, reflecting now, and practicing now. And then you'll see the results now in this life. And that's through the eradication of ignorance. So it's because of the ignorance that the craving and anger continues to exist and the mind just stays stuck in this continuous cycle. But by you coming to classes, by you reading books, by you learning, reflecting, and practicing, you cultivate more and more wisdom. And now through this gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress, you're transforming the mind and moving it closer and closer to the wisdom of how to actually eliminate the craving and anger. So it's things like the three universal truths, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the five precepts, the Brahma Viharas, which are four healthy mental states that need to be cultivated in the mind, the natural law of Gotama, the seven factors of enlightenment, extensive meditation training, and eliminating the 10 fetters that are the core central teachings that you're focused on, and you're cultivating wisdom about those things. These are all things that I'm teaching in this particular program, and you're going to need to revisit those more than one time. But as you do, you're acquiring more and more and more wisdom about how the world actually functions and how your mind actually functions. And now with that wisdom, you can put into practice wise decision making that leads to more and more wholesome results. And you'll see in situations where you were once angry and bitter and harsh that the mind's not doing that anymore. Where you were once frustrated and agitated or annoyed, you can see that your mind's not doing that anymore because you're arising more and more wisdom. You're getting rid of more and more of your cravings, and therefore you're getting rid of more and more of the anger and the hostility or the bitterness or even the annoyment or the frustration. So this is the three poisons, and this ignorance is kind of like the dirtiest one of all of them. This is the one that's keeping everything stuck. So that's why you're working on cultivation of wisdom, and that's the primary goal of this path to enlightenment, and is why you don't follow me. You're not a believer. You're not a devotee. You're an independent practitioner looking to cultivate wisdom. You're on the path to enlightenment as a practitioner, cultivating wisdom, and then you're looking to maybe a teacher in their resources for the guidance of how to actually do that. So let me know if you guys have any questions here on this one. This is the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom or confusion. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here on this one. So now just to summarize what we've discussed today before I end the class, we've discussed the three poisons, the three unwholesome roots, or the three fires. This is craving, anger, and ignorance, or that unknowing of true reality. But you're going to see the other ways that people refer to this. Greed, hatred, and delusion is one of those ways. Desire, ill will, or confusion is a way that you might see people referring to this. This is referring to those unwholesome qualities of mind that are motivating all unskillful conduct. And now when you put out that unskillful conduct, this all comes back to you. So you would like to eradicate these three unwholesome roots from the mind. And what you're doing is you're bringing in the antidotes to these poisons, or you're uprooting the three unwholesome roots and you're bringing in the three wholesome roots. The three wholesome roots, or the antidotes to these poisons, is generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. These are the exact opposites, because that craving is the longing, yearning, wanting things to be self-pleasing, and the mind becomes selfish. The exact opposite of that is sharing with others without any expectation of anything in return. The anger, the bitterness, the hostility, that's that unskillfulness. That's the resentment towards others. The exact opposite of that is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. And then the ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality, the confusion and misunderstanding. The exact opposite of that is wisdom, where you understand true reality, where you have clear vision to understand how these natural laws function. And when you acquire that wisdom, you start functioning through it, where day to day you're making decisions through this wisdom. That's where you're uprooting the ignorance out of the mind. So it's through eliminating and eradicating the three unwholesome roots and choosing to make decisions through the three wholesome roots that you'll eliminate 100% of your discontentedness and all the suffering. The mind will essentially move to enlightenment. So you're gradually bringing down your craving, your anger, and your ignorance, and gradually increasing your generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom in all the various relationships that you have. So this is the three poisons, or the three unwholesome roots, or the three fires. And what I'm going to do to just close out class is just thank all of you guys for joining. Thank you for being interested to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha, because as you're gradually learning these and you're implementing them into your life more and more, you're going to see continuous improvement and continuous change in your day-to-day life. So thank you. I really admire people who choose to do this inner work, because early on, it's really easy to go to a building, do a bunch of rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship, and you might feel good for, a couple hours when you come out of there. But then life is really hard because you didn't learn any wisdom to actually figure out how to make better and better decisions in your life. So while it might be easy for that hour or so, when you leave later, the whole rest of your life is very difficult and very challenging. This practice is very different. It's challenging up front, and it's quite challenging to actually learn and practice these teachings. But then later, that's as you're going through life becomes easier and easier because you've cultivated the wisdom. So I really admire people who's willing to roll up the sleeves, sink their teeth in, and actually apply effort and energy towards learning and practicing these teachings, because it takes determination, dedication, and diligence to really choose to do something like this, to do that inner work and look at the mind and realize that, you're not making 100% wise decisions. And that's okay. You don't have to feel guilty or shameful about that, but just know that you're gradually making your way to improvements. And it's this path that's helping you to do that. But as long as these three poisons are in the mind, you won't be able to do that. So that's why transforming the mind of these three poisons is so important. So next week in our class, I'm going to be in chapter 9 of our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. In chapter 9, this is titled, What is Gama and How Does It Affect Me? All the way through the program, we've been talking about the natural law of Gama in one way or another, but now I'm going to dive into it in detail, and we're going to look at the intricacies of this natural law, because what you're actually doing on this path is you're working to extinguish all your unwholesome Gama and get to the point where you're only experiencing wholesome Gama in your day-to-day life. And by going in and talking about it in detail next week, you'll be able to learn how to do that. So you can read the book before or after class. It's helpful to do that, and then learn in the class as well. And then on Wednesday, it's the first class where we're now going to start rotating. One class, we're going to do breathing mindfulness meditation. And then the following class on Wednesday, we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation. And then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have. So now for the rest of the group learning program, I'm going to be rotating between breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness, breathing mindfulness and loving kindness each Wednesday. And then I open up to any and all questions that you guys might have related to the teachings or any challenges or struggles that you're having. And then this weekend, a week from today, on Sunday, I'm going to be starting a retreat here in Chiang Mai that's going to be live streamed. You can attend here in Chiang Mai, or you can attend through the live stream. It's called Developing a Life Practice to Attain the First Stage of Enlightenment. In this particular retreat, I'm going to be teaching everything that you need in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. The first 2.5 days of the retreat is essentially what you've been learning in the group learning program already. So that could be a good refresher for you. But the last 2.5 days or 3 days is all brand new stuff that I only teach once a year, and you haven't actually learned those things yet. So if you would like to attend either live or you would like to watch the recordings, those are going to be available as I'm teaching them. The retreat starts on Sunday at 3 p.m. Thai time. So that could be very early for you, and you might not be able to, watch that particular session, but it's going to be recorded on our YouTube channel and in Facebook, so you could actually attend that way. And then Monday through Friday, I'm going to be doing a 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. session here in Thailand. Then we're going to go out on excursions from 12:30 to 6:30. And then from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., we're going to be having another class. So this might actually work into your schedule depending on where you are in the world. But nonetheless, you have the recordings that you can gradually watch over whatever period of time that you like. But if you'd like to participate live, you could potentially do that through YouTube, Facebook, or in Zoom. And this will be a great class if you would like to really learn some new and things that you haven't learned before. But if you're already digesting a lot through this group learning program, no need to move into that yet. You can, learn those things at another time. For now, maybe just focus on the group learning program and what you're learning here. But I'd like to let you know that I'm having that particular retreat come up, and it's going to be starting this Sunday. So again, thank you all for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.